evening. It is a pleasure to welcome you to the Investors Breakfast here for the Missoula Economic Partnership. My name is Royce Engstrom, and I have the privilege of serving as president of the University of Montana, a job which is just nonstop fun every day. It's good to see such a wonderful crowd here this morning. I think we have about 150 people for breakfast this morning, and that just is a great testimony to the interest in all of us in this community for economic development. So thank you for coming this morning, and we look forward to a rousing discussion during the course of the next hour and a half. I'm especially pleased to welcome Governor Steve Bullock. Would you join me in welcoming the governor today? Governor, thank you for coming over here and being with us this morning. I have to tell all of you that this is, I think, about the 6th or 7th trip to Missoula and to this campus this semester already. And so Governor Bullock is deeply interested in what's going on in economic development and in higher education. And Governor, thanks for that personal interest on your part. It's a pleasure to have you so engaged with us. I want to just tell you a couple of quick stories about some interesting activities that have been going on of late that involve economic development and the University of Montana. So one of those is a partnership that James Grunke and I worked together on to put together what we called the first business roundtable at the University of Montana. A year or so ago, I was invited into a company here in Missoula to talk about what was going on at the university, and it was great fun for me, and I thought we need to do that in reverse. We need to begin inviting more companies into the university so that we learn more what's going on in Missoula and the surrounding area in the business world. And so James and I put our heads together and we put on the first business roundtable that focused on the IT sector. And so with James' connections, he put together a wonderful group of people that came to the university and got together with our administrators and our faculty in the computer science area, some of our business folks from the School of Business, and we had a wonderful hour-and-a-half, 2-hour conversation about the kinds of connections that we could grow between the university and the IT sector here in Missoula. And so those kinds of conversations are extremely helpful to me and to us at the university as we plan our curricula and try to prepare students for today's world. We are operating under a plan here at the university called Building a University for the Global Century, and we want to make sure that we're preparing our students so that they can hit the ground running in the business world and other sectors of our economy as we go forward. So that business roundtable was a wonderful start to that. Another activity that I wanted to just mention to you is a meeting that a group of us from around the Montana University system just attended in Salt Lake City. It was a meeting of something called Complete College America. And I have to credit Governor Bullock again for getting us involved in Complete College America. It's a nationwide movement. I think there are 34 states involved at this point. And the whole message or the whole point of this organization is to increase the number of people graduating from college at some level. As both President Obama and Governor Bullock have talked about, we have a goal of increasing the percentage of our population with a college credential. We're about 40% of our population now, and it's anticipated that over 60% of the jobs available to our people going forward are going to require some level of college preparation. That might be as short as a 1-year certificate, an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, or maybe even a graduate degree. So we have quite a gap there, and so Complete College America is an organization that is focused on strategies that are intended to increase the number of people who actually gain access in the front door of college, but more importantly, graduate from college in a timely manner and with a minimum of debt. And so Complete College America has focused on a number of specific strategies, and I'm happy to report that after attending that meeting, we are in great shape here in Montana with respect to those strategies. We're working hard on things like dual enrollment, for example, where a high school student can begin to accumulate college credits, and that's one of the key strategies before us through Complete College America. So it was a very invigorating meeting and one that, again, reinforced the connection between education and economic development. And thirdly, I just wanted to remind you that we have selected the site for the new Missoula College on East Broadway over here, and a big incentive for doing that was, in fact, the connection to our business community and the opportunity to create more programming that puts our students in contact with our businesses here in the Missoula area. Well, thank you for coming this morning, and it's going to be a great meeting. So at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Chairman Fee. Jeff?
Thanks, Royce, for hosting us. It's always a pleasure, and it's always very fun to be over here on the campus. You just feel younger being over here, at least I do. Actually, sometimes when I see the students, I feel a lot older. So I want to welcome all of our investors, our strategic partners, our elected officials, and guests this morning for our annual investor breakfast. We have some important guest presentations during breakfast, as Royce mentioned just a minute ago, so I'll be brief, but I do encourage you to read the information in the progress report. I'm going to give you a brief highlight of some of the things that we are doing. Some of the things that we are doing to support businesses, and we've been very successful and very busy this past year in supporting business growth in our community. And I'm going to talk about 3 ways in which we are doing that type of support. First, the Developer Showcase. We hosted a Developer Showcase this summer to show off the numerous possibilities for projects in Missoula. One developer has several properties under contract already after that event, and we expect to see more investments made locally in very short order. The showcase was part of a broader effort to meet our strategic goal of bringing capital investment to our community. Second, business retention. The Partnership Business Retention and Expansion Program saw some major wins this year and continues to be the lion's share of our organization's work. With the help of our strategic partners in 2013 alone, we helped numerous companies like Hunting GPS Maps, Nutritional Laboratories, Pterodact Solutions, and Rocky Mountain Biologicals secure funding for more than $1.7 million in support of 235 new jobs. We provided strategic guidance to 112 local companies, connecting local entrepreneurs to new resources that they need to grow and survive and thrive. Over 200 businessmen and women attended this year's 43 Innovation Initiative free sessions, learning about everything from marketing and web development to financing a business. And together with Blackfoot Telecommunications and Montech, we've added the highest level of technology to any incubator in the state, offering 1 gigabyte per second throughput capacity for free to Montech tenants. On the business recruitment front, Allcom is on the ground at Bonner, employing people in our community and helping to revitalize our manufacturing base. We're in communication now with another manufacturing group, taking a very hard look at Missoula. In fact, we were hoping we'd be able to make an announcement this morning. We're this close, hopefully, unless we have another, as Brigitte calls it, a soul-crushing blow, to being able to announce some good news on that front as well. Of course, our recruitment efforts aim to attract businesses not only from manufacturing, but from IT, forest products, renewables, back office, professional services, and life science. And as you've noted in the progress report, we've been in touch with 40 companies considering expansion here. This sustained, methodical, professional effort will continue, and we will see success. We are also working hard to develop relationships with site selectors to develop and leverage our business attraction dollars and get Missoula on the list as a desirable site for key industries. We had 2 site selectors here this past September who we feel will bring key strategic allies in our ongoing effort to bring more primary jobs in Missoula. We had about a 2-hour session with them at our board meeting talking about the process of economic development, and it really is interesting. I've been doing this in some shape, form, or fashion for a number of years, and it was probably one of the most informative. And we were talking afterwards about how do we get our investors as a whole more exposed to that type of educational session, because the more we as a community really understand economic development, I think it enhances our ability to work more effectively together in growing jobs for our communities in our state. Partnership support, of course, the work done at the partnership is supported by our dedicated board of directors and our growing list of investors. And to that end, we have, number one, I'd like to thank our longtime investors, certainly the ones that got us off the ground, and the ones that continue to support the partnership, and we welcome our new investors who have come to the board this year. And as you can see on the slide, we have a number of new investors that have joined us, and I'd like to offer them a round of applause for joining the organization. We also, on an annual basis, go through the process of electing and nominating new board members. Our board and committee members dedicate many volunteer hours to advance our partnership's goals, and our strength as an organization is a direct result of the guidance from these top industry leaders at the table. Today, we are going to vote on approving a slate for a three-year board term serving 2013 to 2016. The nominations were prepared by the Governance Committee. The slate was approved by the board in September, and I am pleased to present to you the slate of nominees for this year's directors. The slate includes Jeff Crouch, Senior Project Manager for CTA Architects. Jeff is completing a 2-year term. Tom Pugh. Tom is President of Pugh Construction, serves as a Vice Chair of the Executive Committee, and chairs the Investor Relations Committee. Deb Petit, President of Petit Construction, is completing a 2-year term. And a new board member, Bill Squires, the Chief Executive of Blackfoot Telecommunications. Bill was unable to be here this morning. He's actually on the way to Boise on a business expansion trip. I had an opportunity to run into him at the Alaska boardroom last night at the airport, and expresses his sincere honor for being nominated and his regrets for not being able to join us this morning. I would like to remind everybody that the vote is for investors only, and there's one vote per investor, and at this point in time, I would like to open the floor for a motion to accept the slate. We have a motion. Is there a second? We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Again, we'd like to thank our investors for your continued confidence in the partnership, and we welcome our new and returning board members. At this time, I am very honored to have Governor Steve Bullock join our keynote, or provide our keynote for our annual meeting. Governor Bullock has made economic development a primary focus since he was sworn in as our 24th governor in this great state of Montana. A graduate of Claremont McKenna College and a Columbia Law School, Steve's legal career has been split between private and public sectors. He served a term as a Montana Attorney General, where he pioneered the successful Montana 24/7 sobriety program for repeat drunk drivers and worked to curb prescription drug abuse. As governor, his Main Street Montana project is working with businessmen and women across the state to develop a bottom-up, self-sustaining blueprint to support the creation, recruitment, and retention of Montana jobs. Governor Bullock was born in Missoula, so we'll call him our own. And we're proud to have him working on our behalf in Helena. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Steve Bullock.
Thanks so much, Jeff, and thank all of you for having me here today. I guess I especially want to thank both Jeff and the mayor for the leadership in supporting innovative approaches to economic development, but more than just the two of them, to have more or less 100 different businesses come together and say that what can we do, what can you collectively do to promote Missoula as a good place to live, to work, to raise a family. Your work brings together diverse economic interests and shows that you understand that no one person or one organization really has the answer to it all. And you recognize that we each have a stake in that economy, and if we can work together collaboratively, we're going to be that much better off. I think we can all agree that collaboration is something that we all need to see more of, not just as we work to recruit businesses, but certainly in government and certainly in politics. One of the first things that I really tried to push when I came into office was to start to change the tenor of the debate during the legislative sessions. We see enough of the partisan bickering occurring in Washington, D.C., and we also see the real results of what can occur when folks can't try to find some sort of common ground and understanding. And while I may disagree with individuals and disagree strongly, that doesn't mean that I don't respect their service, and ultimately had said that good ideas don't come from one party or one community or one individual, and anybody who had a good idea that was committed to improving the lives of Montanans without respect to ideology or philosophies, that I'd be more than happy and excited about partnering with them as we went forward. And I think that we did see some real good results from the collaborative relationship through this last legislative session. Well, there's always challenges by all means, but well, I think the 2011 session was kind of hallmarked by partisan bickering. What we saw in 2013 is individuals coming together to try to find some real solutions. Some of them seem small. We changed the way that we finance fires and the funding of paying for fires in our state. Whereas it's always been basically you have to pay whatever it costs, and then we stick the next legislature with the tab without actually thinking going forward what other impacts that might be. Bipartisan group came together and said, let's actually create a fund so we can pay our bills as they come due, because that's how Montanans live and how Montanans ought to be. We're the only state in the nation that actually fixed our pension system without increasing taxes. And if you're a business, I was in San Francisco for the last couple days earlier this week. If you're a business that's looking at a substantially large unfunded pension liability for the state, you know something's going to give, and often what that's going to give is increased taxes upon you and your business. We made record investments in education this legislative session, and we also made significant investments in infrastructure. All the while, we did this without raising taxes. In fact, we lowered taxes for every business in the state and totally eliminated the business equipment tax for 2/3 of the companies that pay it. And now we stand with a substantial rainy day fund, so Montana's prepared to tackle unexpected challenges that come our way. I used to think, well, it's just the unexpected challenges of the floods or the fires or things like that, but now sort of add in unexpected challenges of government shutdowns. In point of fact, many states, because of waiting for essentially the federal dollars to come in for some of the public employees, were laying off state employees early on through the shutdown. Montana, because of the way that we've been managing the dollars, we're in a much better place. Getting our fiscal house in order to the point where then even the rating agencies are taking a look at what we're doing, be it fire funds or be it pension fixes, I think it's only the first step of what can really be done for Montana. And since the legislature left, been working on a number of key proposals and areas that we've been working on. Jeff had mentioned, first I launched what we call the Main Street Montana Project. I tapped two CEOs, a guy named Larry Simpkins, Missoula's own CEO of Washington Companies, and Bill Johnstone, CEO of D.A. Davidson. Any business that's looking at either coming to Montana or expanding in Montana, the first thing you'd do is you'd put together a business plan. You'd assess where you could be. You'd assess the strengths and liabilities of your business and the community. By and large, Montana as a state, at least the state government side, has never put together sort of that business plan or blueprint. Plan that builds on our strengths as our state, tackles challenges that might have slowed businesses and wage growth in past years. So I tasked Bill and Larry with saying, I need you to do this. And I need you first of all, that the first place you need to turn, if you're really talking about the business success and potential for our state, is to the businesses and the individuals in Montana. They had a series of roundtable discussions, one of which was on University of Montana's campus, also reached out at a county-by-county level and had contact or input from over 3,000 Montanans from across the state, from all walks of life, from every corner of our state in the process. We've heard some great things through these Main Street Montana Project events. We've heard that we've got a hard-working, well-educated workforce. We have amazing entrepreneurs. We have incredible innovators. We have an incredible quality of life. But we've also heard, though, that they've identified areas where we can work to improve. We've heard about the need for additional investment in our infrastructure, be that from internet capability to infrastructure in oil and gas communities. We've heard that the state must continue to find a way to ensure that Montana workers have access to training for the jobs that are going to be in demand in this state. We've heard about the continuing need to make sure that government services are not only effective but predictable, and that when, especially at the state level, when you're entering into something, be it from permitting or looking for economic development opportunities, you're not going from agency to agency to agency. And through this, through the project too, we've also continued to hear about the important role that investments in our education system play in building and maintaining a vibrant workforce. I'll say briefly, and there'll also be the opportunity for questions and answers though, that so the Main Street project, it's in process. I mean, first what we wanted to do is I tasked him, let's go out and hear about what are our challenges and what are our opportunities. Let's also do some things with our neighboring states. We've already gone down to Colorado. They're going to go to Idaho, I think, and the Dakotas. The goal is to have a more or less that blueprint or business plan put together by first quarter next year. It's not, though, something that we plan on, here's a report, land on the battleship, say mission accomplished. A continuing iterative process of both not just on a legislative side, not just on a state government side, but how can we continue to build on the process more or less so it becomes a critical part of the driver for economic development. Hearing of, though, and it was no matter what corner of the state we went to, a consistent theme really was not only the talent and training of the workforce, but also the overall educational system. And when I talked to business leaders, had the opportunity to sit down with Safra Katz of Oracle Monday or Tuesday of this week, and said, what's the most important thing? I mean, when you're looking at, they hire 14 employees every day, counting Christmas. They have 125,000 employees around the country. And said the most important thing is whether a workforce is talented and trained, and the quality of the educational system, because I know that's a place that I can continue to stay. And the first thing that many folks, as I'm talking to businesses, ask about is really our educational system and the educational attainment of the workers. So it's that much more appropriate that we join at President Engstrom's campus, and we have this here on campus today. I'm proud that I think that we have been taking steps, even this year, to really focus on areas of education, areas that will matter. We froze tuition at Montana's colleges and universities because we know that every time tuition increases, it's essentially a tax on 50,000 working families in Montana across the state. Working with many in this room, we passed what I call the jobs bill, jobs and opportunities by building schools, which includes then a big chunk of the funding for Missoula College. It not only creates the opportunity for immediate jobs building this infrastructure, but if we really want this 21st century workforce, we can't expect them to be learning in 19th century facilities all the time. And it was a visit with the dean here at Missoula College that hit me pretty hard when you had a facility that really was built for 700 students and had over 2,000, 8 trailers that you wouldn't want to live in, you can barely learn in, yet doing some incredible things even with that facility, and the recognizing that we can do that much more with the improvements of it. We made historic investments this past session in our elementary, middle, and high school so that our students entering college and workforce will start to have more of the skills necessary to succeed, but we also tied and provided some opportunities to get some real data back from that. Working with education institutions, private sector across the state, and the public sector, we secured a $25 million grant to help our 2-year colleges really develop and work on the curricula to make sure that what they're providing is going to be what businesses need in our state. I think, though, that we're really not one to rest on our laurels in any area. Montanans aren't. And continuing to work on improving the educational opportunity side of this and throughout Montana. I sent my kids to school this fall and kind of returned to school in many respects at the same time, but with a lot different purpose. Traveled the state from Billings to Browning to Poplar to Missoula, looking at from all the way early childhood education through our graduate programs to ask really what's working in education, where do we need to be doing more, where else can we go? Visited a high school in Fort Peck that's working hard to try to reduce the number of students dropping out. Because when a student's dropping out in Fort Peck, the impact's more than just at Fort Peck or anywhere else. The impact's overall to the overall state. Visit an early learning facility at Great Falls where on the public side, they've said, we can actually put together an early childhood education program. We know that going in, 75% of the kids had intensive needs. After 1 year, 75% of the kids were kindergarten ready. Went to technical colleges where students and saw students getting hands-on training for jobs that are in high demand. The time sort of back in the school served as both a refresher of some of the great things that are happening in our state, but a source of inspiration then to work to try to make it that much better. We do have amazing schools in our state with students that are excited to learn, teachers who are committed to sharing their knowledge, and parents who are in many areas active and great participants in their children's learnings. But it's up to us ultimately to make sure that the tools are being provided to ensure that every student has that opportunity and the opportunity to fulfill the potential that they might have. The President Engstrom mentioned it, that was one of the things in the marker of even my State of the State address. I said, we need to commit as a state to go from about 40% of our adults with some sort of professional certification or higher ed to 60%. And we can do it in the next 10 years. It's exciting from the perspective that if you look at Montana, we are nationally growing faster than anyone else in our percentage of adults getting a higher post-secondary degree, but we still have a long way to go. And the shot that I had said was let's set it at 60% by 2020. And we can do that by making sure that our students are better prepared for when they enter college. So that begins through the high school level. We can do it through dual credit opportunities. So while in high school, and that's not just for the overachiever so they can cut down on their tuition bill, but it's for those students in our high schools that might not have ever had someone tell them, you know what, you're college material. If they can have that first introduction to college while still in the safety of a high school, I think that we're going to be that much better off. We're working on, through Complete College America, performance standards as well, and saying that we have expectations of what we want out of colleges and universities with time to degree, with the potential for graduations. And we'll make sure that then, and we're working with the university systems as well to make sure that we're meeting the needs of workforces. Talking to Bill Johnson from the U of M was down with us in San Francisco as we had some meetings and a meeting with San Francisco ambassadors. It's a great reminder, too, in that conversation that when people say, well, I'm not sure if you have the workforce in Montana. I mean, first of all, we need to work with the site selectors and things, which is exciting what you're doing directly here to show what we have. But also we can say, you know what, we have a workforce, also a potential pool of 300,000 people. These are 150,000 University of Montana alums and friends, many of them that would love to get back to Montana. So if you help us with that pipeline, we can further tap into it. It's more than just at the college level, though. I mean, I'm also committed to continuing to work to improve elementary, middle, high schools by working with both the teachers and the institutions to institute more rigorous, consistent standards. We'll ultimately be guaranteeing whether our kids go to Ekalaka or Dillon, that they're getting that education. We also need to make sure, and working with it's here at the campus, the Digital Academy. I mean, how exciting it is that someone can learn Mandarin Chinese. You don't necessarily just have to be in a larger community, that we need to be providing those opportunities all across the state. And we need to be working together as communities to reduce the dropout rates. It also said, though, that in point of fact, that if we're really worried about what our workforce is going to look like and what the job opportunities are, we can't start focusing on that kid when they first either enter the workforce or first are graduating from college. We need to be looking at it when they first enter the world. And really, we know from its economists that investments in early childhood education programs from 0 to 5 have 7 to a 9 to $1 return, and is really going to shape their successes. Montana is one of only 10 states in the country that have never invested state dollars in early learning programs. Notwithstanding the fact that by the time a kid hits 5 years old, 80% of their brain's developed. Their success is those that are involved in early childhood education programs, much more likely to go on to higher education, much less likely to get into problems outside of school, and they're much more likely to complete school. So I think that we as a community and a state really need to look at, as we do in other areas, so what have the other 40 states figured out that we haven't, and how can we make meaningful investments to make sure that our kids are best prepared all throughout. I'm committed to helping both Montana businesses and the communities really to create new jobs, increase the economic opportunities, not only for that next generation, but everything that we can do immediately today for that worker that feels like they're either underemployed or unemployed. And I think that we do enter into it in a great position. I mean, when you look at sort of some of the metrics, ranked the #1 place to be an entrepreneur, ranked 7th best in the nation for our business tax climate, an incredible quality of life. So many things that I think businesses are looking for are here, and it's just up to us working with you to help create those opportunities that are that much greater. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. Again, I applaud the efforts of all of you coming together, and I like how this is a shareholder meeting, and you are investors. You're not just investing in James Grunke, you're investing in the future of what your community is going to be. And you're investing in making sure that all the opportunities that you've had, there's going to be that many more opportunities for those that come after you. Thanks so much for having me. Be happy to, I think, answer any questions, or at least take questions, then decide if I want to answer them.
I would like to thank Governor Bullock for you being here this morning, for your disposition around economic development, for making economic development a focus for your administration. And we certainly hope that you continue to see the Missoula Economic Partnership as a key strategic ally and partner for your efforts at the state level and certainly at the national level as well. So thanks again. So at this point in time, we're going to open up the floor for questions. We're going to start with a couple of our board of directors. We're going to start with Deb Poteet. Deb, I've been looking for you. Where are you? There she is.
Good morning, Governor. The partnership works closely with the University of Montana, with Missoula College and the Missoula County Schools, and you may have already addressed this, but we were wondering what role the education system would be in the your Main Street Montana project.
Thanks, Deb. And yeah, addressed it in part, but it really is stunning to me how many times that I am hearing that from either potential companies coming in or others, that really the first question is, what's the quality of your workforce? And as we've spoken to companies, and I've been working with not only President Engstrom, but throughout the university system, there should be no excuse for us in a state as more or less agile as we are. If a company comes and says, I'd love to put 400 jobs in Missoula, but I don't know if I have the workforce, then we need to say not only, here's what the workforce we have, but we have a commitment also through our 2- and 4-year colleges to make sure that we'll feed that pipeline so that you can have a comfort level with that. The Main Street project, though, that has been one of the consistent things that in every corner that we've heard. And when I say every corner of the state, is that the importance of education to that. Making sure then also to tie the business side of things with education and higher education. It's exciting, you know, I just sort of ticked off some of the things, but when the feds gave us, I think it was just $25 million grant, principally for the 2-year side of thing, it's nationally in total, I think they gave out less than 50 million. They liked what Montana provided, because what Montana provided was not only our higher ed system, but businesses coming together in partnership as well, saying that working together, we can really do some great things here. So my guess is, I'm not writing the report, but given what we've heard in all corners, I got to go to, I guess, I don't know, 4 or 5 of the 7 roundtables that Larry and Bill had. But given that education has consistently been a chunk of that and raised by business leaders and community members all throughout the state, that's going to be a big piece of as we look to where Montana can be.
Thank you.
Good morning, Governor.
Morning, Commissioner.
Technology is a growing industry here in Missoula and across the state. There's an increased use of technology to improve productivity across sectors, but many of our economic development programs are actually developed to assist brick and mortar companies. So do you feel the current economic programs are organized or optimized to meet the growing need of technology companies, or is there a need for some new programs?
I think I know what you feel based on the question. We have, and your economic development folks could say it here, anybody could say, if you said, how does either at the local level or the state level, how can we provide assistance to get a company to either expand or locate? It's interesting in as much, and it was before I got elected, it was a tour through Diversified Plastics here in Missoula, where the head of it said, I don't have time to even try to find what these programs are. I'm trying to run a business, and I'm trying to build a business. If you'd had time, what he'd see is we could give you a flyer that folds again and again with real little print that really we should be providing by the end of it sort of economic incentives for cheater glasses, just to try to figure out even what this thing says. When we look at our economic development, what we at the state and often at the local level can offer, it's come in at a real patchwork basis. I mean, it's a legislature thinks, oh, maybe we should try this, maybe we should try that, but nobody's ever, that I'm aware of at least, stepped back and said, are we actually, other than these were good ideas, are we meeting the needs? And where are there gaps? As the commissioner says, well, we may well have gaps. You know, we have some good things for worker training. We have a number of things. We may well have gaps in sort of the new economy areas. So that's another area that we're tasked with working on the Main Street side, is saying, let's actually holistically look at all these economic development programs and what's not working or what's underperforming, what should we get rid of, what do we need to add? And at the state level too, if you looked at the economic development programs, you could end up going to 5 different state agencies. This doesn't make sense either. So I'm internally saying, let's all get together, because nobody that's trying to run a business has the time to be bouncing from agency to agency to agency. We should really be all collaborating that and working that forward. So, long way to say that I think you're right. I think we're taking a look at it. Part of that may be the next legislative session coming through and saying, here's a different set of potential packages. Please.
Governor, the state of Montana is profoundly affected economically and in terms of community vitality by the oil boom in eastern Montana. And it's clearly expanding and growing exponentially into Montana based on all the projections of the industry and by the community leaders. I know that you went to the legislature during your first session and asked for bonding authority to try to provide infrastructure improvements. But what's the strategy moving forward to make sure that our energy sector meets the needs of Montana and Montana communities?
Yeah, you know, the first time I met the governor of North Dakota, I said, "Hi, Governor Steve Bullock, new in Montana. Do you mind a little border realignment? Because I'd like to take a little." And the governors I didn't even recognize have security people, so I almost got nailed by the North Dakotans. You know, there's about 200 wells on that side. There are 20 on the Montana side. And we actually permit faster. We have an oil and gas tax holiday for 18 months. A big chunk of that, I mean, why the development disparity? Well, we're on the shallow end of the kiddie pool. Now, that doesn't mean that the growth isn't going to continue in Montana, and it doesn't mean also that as gas prices figure out their way, that there's not going to be much, that there will be more significant growth. And it's a challenge for all of us because it is providing great, not just in oil and gas tax revenue, that's the smallest piece of it, but secondary jobs and from Billings up and all throughout, some real great growth opportunities for our state. And I think that ultimately we need to do it right. There are some real challenges with infrastructure. I mean, when we look at investments in eastern Montana in our oil and gas communities, we substantially up them from where they were in the past, but that doesn't help if you're a local city and saying, well, wait a minute, my drinking water is going to be system or my sewer system's overrun. We've asked and we're working with trying to put together that next package. Bonding, from my perspective, would have made great sense. I mean, Montana is one of the lowest states in the nation to, as far as the level of debt we have. On the one hand, I agree that's good, but on the other hand, it's sort of like the crazy uncle that wants to buy a house, but he has no credit rating because he's always had so much money that he doesn't have to deal with it. When we had record low interest rates and the opportunity, it would have been nice to really take a long-term, both bonding of the infrastructure in eastern Montana and our investments in our university system schools. But we're sitting down even now and trying to put together a package to address those needs, because the other thing that it's in all of our interests too is to make sure that as the continuing boom, which may not just be a boom, occurs, that it's also done right. And we need to make investments up front to make sure that occurs. I try not to pick favorites here.
Good morning, Governor.
Good morning.
Steve Carlson, the CEO of Community Medical Center. Was recently hearing the governor of Pennsylvania make a compelling argument on why he supported the expansion of Medicaid, how it's adding 16,000 jobs to his state, how even after year 3 through 6, when he's paying 10% of that, the taxes off those jobs more than pays for any additional costs for Medicaid expansion. I'm curious if you agree with his argument relative to Montana, and if so, what we can expect from your administration at the next legislative session.
Yeah. You know, I usually go in and say, here are all the successes as opposed to here are all the failures and ways that we as a state, I think, have been set back in the last 10 months. One of the, I think, failures of the legislative session was the failure to expand Medicaid. in Montana. Here was a proposal that was supported by the State Chamber of Commerce, just about every local Chamber of Commerce, just about every local economic development group, AARP Montana, veterans groups, every newspaper that opined said, we need to do this, it's right for our state. It provided the opportunity to create 5,000 jobs in Montana. I think next year alone, expand coverage to another 70,000 Montanans, really start providing the opportunity also to look at how we're providing health care, because most folks, think that we pay too much, we get too little, we just pay for repeated tests, not outcomes. So to really start looking at the overall system that we have. It was supported by majorities in each house. Over 50% in each, the House and the Senate voted for it, but it was put into a committee where you needed 60 to get it out. As a result, it's interesting because you could go over to, Pennsylvania is a great example. You can go to Nevada, you can go to Arizona, you can go to New Mexico, you can go to Ohio, you can go to New Jersey. Those states all have a couple things in common. They have Republican governors that were very, very much against the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, but Republican governors that said, it's nuts if we don't do this for our state. So they all share that in common, and they also share in common the fact that now they're going to end up getting health care for their residents using Montana's tax dollars because we've decided not to provide that. I think it's something that we need to continue to work on. There's some discussion about a ballot initiative. Last time an expansion of Medicaid was on the ballot, 70% of Montanans, it was the Healthy Montana Kids program, 70% of Montanans said, yes, let's do this, it makes sense. And I'm continuing to talk to legislators, Democrats and Republicans, saying we need to find the path to do this. And I think, frankly, there's some real interest in it. It's unfortunate that we may be waiting till the next session, or at least we may be waiting a while, but it's something that Montana needs to get done.
Governor, I'm Doug Coffin. I'm a professor here at the university and a representative in the legislature for House District 93 here. And one of the things that comes up, and one of the things we struggled with in the last legislative session, is to fund R&D. It doesn't seem that research and development really has the place in our economic development programs that it should. And in the 21st century, that's certainly something that we would hope can be a priority in the next session. And for example, I'm sitting next to a gentleman from the forest products industries, and we're talking about the devastation of the pine bark beetle on our forests. We talk about energy, and in the last session I thought we said, well, if you want coal to have a future, then give it a future and do the research on it to find cleaner ways to use it. In biomedicine, we're struggling to fund graduate students. We have a lot of faculty now and entrepreneurs in the community who are interested in getting into small business innovation research grants, but we don't have enough money to get them there, those P0 grants. So through things like MBRCT and other mechanisms, how can we put the emphasis and invest in our R&D the way that we perhaps should?
No, and I think if you look at, Rivertop Renewables, that came out of the university system. If you look at Blue Marble, that essentially came out of the university system. If you look at not just sort of those kind of businesses that you scratch your head and say, I'm not even sure what's happening there, but a lot of the late, Alex Phillip back there, the computing side, GIS side came out of the university system. So it's not just something to make professors happy that they're doing neat stuff. This is a direct tie to economic development and driving it. And that's one of the first meetings I had with President Engstrom. That's one of the things that he said is we need to, from his perspective, when you look at where Montana needs to be, we need to be pushing and getting additional dollars on the research side. And nice, one of the great things is that President Cruzado and the Commissioner of Higher Ed, Clay Christian, would say the exact same thing. Did provide funding for some of the Valley of Death from the SBIR, STTR this past legislative session, but I think that that's something that we need to lay the groundwork to say that this is an investment that not only, and it does create immediate jobs as individuals are working, but it really lays the foundation for where that economy and where our state can be, and that Montana ought to be investing more.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Thanks again, Governor. Again, it really is a pleasure to have you here, and it's a pleasure to know that you see us as a partner and that you have economic development as a key priority. Our next speaker is Dr. Pat Barkey. As we begin our third year in our 5-year plan, we invited Dr. Barkey to give us an update on how the economy has grown and changed since we began our journey a number of years ago. Dr. Barkey has served as the director of the Bureau of Business and Economic Research at the University of Montana since 2008. He is an economist with more than 26 years of experience in regional forecasting in both public and private sector, and we certainly appreciate having Dr. Barkey join us this morning. Dr. Barkey.
Thanks. It's great to be here, and as I look at this list of investors, and I look around the room and see you all in person, of course, you're what moves the economy. I mean, look to the left and look to the right, and this is the group that moves the economy. I'm the humble scorekeeper, so I'm here to say how we did. So let's go into that, and let's see if I can get this to work, Melanie. There we are. The good news is that I'm not going to talk about the national economy. I'm not going to talk about printing money, or I'm not going to talk about what's going on with the federal government, because the news does get better as you come to Montana, and the news is good when you come to Missoula. But let me talk about where we're going, because I'm the big picture guy. I'm the guy that keeps score on, as I keep telling James, the net job creation in terms of where the overall economy is going. As we look around the state, of course, it's been a difficult time in terms of how the recession has treated different parts of the state. In terms of average growth, since '07, coming up to the end of calendar year 2012, which is when our really good data stop, and we have to wait a little longer to get 2013, Montana has managed to get back into the black in terms of overall growth. So some big negatives, obviously, in the beginning part of that period, and some very encouraging growth coming out. But you can see the pattern of that growth has not been the same everywhere. These are the urban counties that are shown. And you see a checkerboard pattern, and in particular, you see some of the challenges here in western Montana, with Missoula coming in slightly negative and Ravalli County just to our south, which is intimately connected with the Missoula economy as well, as suffering net, this is coming after the recession, a little bit worse than any other area of the state. So it's been a difficult period. But let me divide this up between what happened in the recession and what's happened in the recovery as we go around the state. So in the recession, of course, most of these areas were negative. Not all, but most areas were negative. You can see the state overall in the recession. Of course, we went reverse, and there was a lot of, caused a lot of issue. We weren't alone in the country as we did that. Different parts of the state fared even worse than the state average, including Flathead and Gallatin, which are traditionally been one of the faster growing two parts of the state. In Missoula, the performance was right about at the average. And again, with Ravalli taking on the chin. Of course, why did that happen? I think we know a lot about why that happened. I mean, there was a real cratering in consumer spending. Certainly the housing bust really hurt western Montana. One of the things that's not really well known or understood in this part of the state, but I'm here to tell you, and that is the fact that the whole pattern of U.S. migration changed in this recession. People stopped moving for whatever reason. And population migration is one of the big and powerful dynamics in western Montana, particularly hurting Ravalli County. So what happened in the recovery? Well, I've got these growth bars here as well, and this is a good news story.
I mean, across the entire state. This puts to lie the fact that economists never have good news. This is good news. Across the state, all these areas, even the hardest hit areas, have swung to growth. This is very, very encouraging. You can see in terms of Missoula's growth has swung positive. I will say there's a little asterisk next to Missoula on this graph, and the reason for that is we had an extra year of decline in Missoula. We had a long and shallow downturn. And the reason for that extra year is because Smurfit Stone closed, and that caused our decline just to go 1 year longer than other parts of the state. But the swing to growth has been good, and it's been very encouraging, and it's built largely on many of those same factors, all right? It's the fact that consumers are coming back, people are starting to move again, and as I'll say in a minute, some of the basic drivers of the economy, both in Missoula and Ravalli County, are now contributing to growth instead of taking away from growth. So let me talk a little bit now in terms of the whole trajectory of growth that we've been through, because this is an important story, and there's really two ways of measuring growth. Well, there are many ways. Two I'm going to show you. First, I want to show you the change in overall the wage and salary base for, here's Montana and here's Missoula. And you can see the harshness of the recovery in terms of the amount of total payrolls, inflation adjusted, going over time. And you can see that there's been just a little bit of growth since the end of that. That's the tough news story. The state as a whole, of course, when you take the state together, you're talking about a completely different economic mix. You've got energy in there. You've got more agriculture in there. Those industries have been doing well. They have less of a footprint here in Missoula. Maybe I should do what the governor did and talk. So that's the story in terms of wages and salaries. What about jobs? Jobs is something that people track a little more consistently, a little easier for people to relate to. There's the Montana profile of job growth. It's really delayed in terms of the declines in jobs that started in the middle of the recession, continued for an extra year across the state. In terms of how Missoula is done, you can see it's been a longer recession with now moving into the black in terms of job growth. So this is quite, this has been a challenging experience for Missoula, western Montana overall. The good news is we swung to growth, but of course, I'm here to deliver the not so good news that we dug ourselves a hole in the last few years. So the glass half full is the last data point on that graph, and of course, the experience we've all been through is shown there as well. Let me talk about what different parts of the county of the Missoula economy, how they've been doing. And again, the news is the economy has swung to growth. So the question is, what's growing, all right? And like any economist, I can't make things simple and just tell you I got to put up a graph. And in this case, I'm going to put up a graph that shows you two aspects of growth. The horizontal axis is how you've been doing over the whole entire last calendar year, and the vertical axis is how you did coming out, whether you were accelerating or declining as the year stopped. So put these industries in this quadrant. The last year I have on here is 2012, so I actually don't have 2013 yet. And that government shutdown challenged us too in terms of our economic data. So we're still waiting for the complete data on 2013. Of course, we're not done with the year yet. But among the more challenged in 2012, construction and manufacturing continued to decline somewhat in 2012. Wholesale and retail trade is one of the big factors that's bounced back. Of course, Missoula is a big regional trade center, and that area has swung to growth both in terms of distribution and transportation. Business services is very difficult it's a broad spectrum of professional, educational services of all kinds. That's swung to growth. By the way, the size of these bubbles tells you the size of the industries. Healthcare is very, very strong. And Missoula, and of course, is a very big player in the economy, has had a much better year. There you see accommodations, which is related to non-resident travel. Even government has managed to grow a little bit in Missoula. And then there's a whole bunch. There's actually many, many more industries in here. But the story is things have swung to growth. It's been a growth that's been propelled largely by a resumption of some of the favorable dynamics in the Missoula economy, particularly regarding business formation, consumer spending, and our traditional role as a health and distribution hub. Let me talk just a second about Ravalli County, because Ravalli County is intimately related to the Missoula economy, less diverse. They have different drivers, but a huge part of what happens in Ravalli County is exactly what happens in Missoula County, because those are the same people. They're just driving up here and working. All right. So in terms of the profile, there's Montana again. Ravalli, in terms of wages and salaries, interestingly enough, did not fall as much, but in terms of job performance, it was a different story. Job performance was very, very different. Ravalli County drivers hurt employment more, but in terms of at least wage and salary income, not as much of an effect. So it's clearly different depending how you keep score, but I think the overall story here is that it was a very, very tough recession, but we're now growing again. And I think that's good news. And there hasn't been a lot of good news for a guy like me coming up and talking about the economy in the last 2 or 3 years, as you can imagine. So what's going on? How do we look at the economy in terms of what we expect to see? Well, I have a list of industries here, which we've shown many, many times in our Outlook presentation, which we consider to be drivers of the Missoula economy. Starting from bottom up, the university is a big deal. I mean, it's appropriate that we're here talking about economic development on real estate of the University of Montana, because the University of Montana is one of the biggest, proportionally, it is the biggest driver of what happens in Missoula. So it doesn't govern what happens in Missoula, but it's a big, big piece. The trade center activities, both in healthcare, retail, and services of all kinds. The federal government facilities here in Missoula are a very important driver. Wood and paper products have shrunk clearly since some of the negative developments the last couple of years. Transportation, which is mostly trucking and rail, is a very, very big driver. And then we have tourist spending and others. So how do we see this happening? Well, on February 13, we were very optimistic about the Montana economy, and that optimism has been justified. One of the optimistic things we hoped that 2013 would be a good construction season. That says conflicting reports, but really it's incomplete data. Construction has picked up. We don't have the data yet to demonstrate how much better it is. We know it's better, but we know it's in a deep hole and it's got a ways to go. In terms of what's going on with UM, we don't, there's been some developments at UM that I think are a little bit of concern in terms of overall economic activity, but largely UM has been a source of stability and growth and clearly a big wealth generator for the area economy. The big news is the professional services economy has been doing well. Retail has been a little weak, but it's picking up towards the end. Healthcare experienced a slowdown for a couple of years, and I think that slowdown is over. And the resumption of fast growth in healthcare has been a welcome event for Missoula as one of the two major healthcare centers in the state of Montana. The federal government is a question mark. The federal government is, I said I wasn't going to talk about it, stable at best. Let me just leave it there. I think there's threats ahead for federal government in the medium term, but right now it's a source of stability. Wood and paper products is coming back. National housing starts have picked up. A couple of years ago, forest products people were talking about exporting to Asia because that was the only market that was growing. That's obviously a difficult thing to do logistically and economically. It's a heck of a lot easier to ship it to wherever they're building houses, which has been traditionally what we've done, and that is coming back very strongly. Transportation is an unheralded story here in Missoula, but trucking and rail has been growing very, very steadily. MRL is doing well. In terms of non-resident travel, tourism activity, I think it's the hobby of everybody to attract the tourism economy. We see how busy the streets are and Whitefish or Missoula or whatever, and we say, boy, tourism is back, all right? And it's true that there is a good growth in resident travel, but we're a little bit more sanguine about it. I mean, we think that non-resident travel, it can only grow as fast as consumer spending is growing nationally. I mean, it's hard to see spending on spending, which is the important thing, not visitation, but spending, getting out too far ahead of overall consumer spending growth. So our overall projection of the economy is pretty optimistic. This is where we were, I believe, last year. I think this is the way this graph works. So we've actually updated these forecasts. We like to show you these kind of graphs with all these things crossed out to show you that we have humility and we are wrong often. We learn new things. Our most recent forecast causes some slight revision to some of those negative growth bars I was showing you earlier. It looks like 2012 came in as really the best year that the Missoula economy has seen since before the recession, and our forecast for the out years is more of the same. We're cautiously optimistic. 2.3% growth is, well, if you go back to the 90s, it's very, very low by Missoula standards. But pre-recession, Missoula was actually growing a little bit slower than the state of Montana. So it's coming back close to the kind of growth that we had before the recession began. Just to give you an idea of how that growth stacks up going around the state, for the average of those years, 2013, which we're still forecasting because we don't have data, 2013 going out to 2016, averaging over those years, the state economy we think is going to grow at about 3.2%. That's pretty good. It's showing up in tax collections, and it's showing up in lots of really solid economic indicators that forecast, I think, is looking pretty good right now. The faster growing counties, Gallatin, because of its tech economy and the housing, is coming back a little faster in Bozeman than it is in western Montana. Yellowstone is proximity to energy. But there you see Missoula and River Valley, healthy growth, good growth by pre-recession standards, a little lower than the state average. One of the things that's keeping the state average so doggone high is the fact that the rural eastern counties are not shown in this graph. And they're growing very, very fast, so they're part of the state average. So with that, that's my quick helicopter view of what's going on in Missoula. I think it's a good news story, and I think it's the efforts of the folks in this room that are helping make that happen. So, James, I don't know if you want me to take a question or two, or?
There's a question or two?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Pat Clark with Farron Group. Curious about how your labor income translates into population growth.
Okay, so the question is, how does labor income factor into population growth? I think we look at population growth ultimately feeds into labor income. That's the causality. So population growth occurs in one of two ways. The one way it happens everywhere is just because of increasing longevity. All right, births minus deaths is sort of the natural rate of population growth. The big mover in population growth is in-migration, okay? And in-migration in a community like Missoula, which is a fairly young community, usually happens because of job opportunities or perceived job opportunities. And so the folks who are moving here are moving because they have a job or because they think they can get a job. At least that's one of the big factors. And so therefore, their labor income as in net they move here adds to labor income. So I think that's the story with population is migration, and the story to migration is, at least for younger people, economic opportunity. Yeah, another question.
Yeah, so what I would like you to talk about a little bit is the impact of our transportation costs in and out of Missoula and how that's impacting our growth. For instance, our company, like many companies here, has been working with MEP to address the cost of airfare. And we just sent 2 people to DC, about $1,000 out of Missoula, 320 out of Spokane, cheaper in Bozeman, Helena, Great Falls, Butte. It continues to kill us. And I wondered if you could just expand a little bit and focus MEP on what we need to do to solve the transportation problem in terms of airfare. Thank you.
Okay, and yeah, thank you. Everybody heard the question, I think, is about the cost of transportation impacting the economy. I think, okay, so I'm an economist, I'm a scorekeeper, I'm not a policymaker on this. And I will say that for a community the size of Missoula, there's a reason why airfares are high, and that is because the business model for airlines allows it, quite frankly, in terms of, and so whether or not as a policy we can get that to change, that's out of my scope in terms of how to make that happen. In terms of the impact, transportation costs are a major player. The governor talked about making a business plan with strengths and weaknesses, and strength being labor force. I mean, in some sense, our transportation costs can be a weakness, particularly for goods where there's a physical component, where that close connectivity and that cheap transport of goods is a big part of the model. That's not something on our checklist, okay, for a strength. And you see that, for example, in Montana manufacturing, which is a healthy, vibrant part of the state economy. Montana manufacturing, the strengths of manufacturing in many cases are specialized goods. They're not bulk goods. And one of the reasons is because of that transportation issue. So I guess my answer would be, as a policymaker, I don't know how to make it change. I'm not sure you can make it change, but that's just my opinion. My opinion really doesn't matter. I'm a scorekeeper. But I think those go into the mix in terms of, those are challenges, by the way, which I would argue technology can overcome in many cases. And so I think that's not necessarily an impediment that cannot be worked on. And James stood up, so I think I'm done. Thank you very much.
I must be shorter than everybody else. Thank you, Pat, I think. The curve's going the right way. So as I always follow Pat, I always talk about what we think our role is to change whatever curve he's just talked about. And that really is what we're trying to do at the Missoula Economic Partnership, change the curve and make our own opportunities. So we have great appreciation for the expertise you bring, and we thank you for that overview. I also want to point out some guests that we have in the audience today. First is Dr. Abraham Kim, who's the new director of the Mansfield Center. And one of the things the Mansfield Center does is they host I better read it, the Economic Empowerment Exchange Program for Southeastern Asian countries. And we have some of the fellows that are here who have spent the last month learning about economic development and how the economy works that they're going to take back to their home countries of Burma and Thailand and Cambodia. And so Dr. Kim's back there as well as the fellows, and thank you for being here and learning about our economy. And let me thank all of you for your investment in our community. If it wasn't for you, we couldn't do this. And let me just remind you who the team is. We have, first of all, Brigitte Miranda Freer in the back. Stand up. She's the director of our business development. And she's been here since the beginning. And she really is the reason that she continues to make us look good in our business development services. And if any of you have ever had to do a site visit with her and worked on her agenda, you know how good a professional job she does. Secondly, I want to introduce Melanie Brock. She's new to our team. She's the Director of Strategic Initiatives, and she handles government affairs. She's working on our entrepreneurship program, and she's doing investor relations. And amongst that is getting new investors. So all of you who are in here who are not currently an investor, expect to see Melanie soon. And finally, we have Desiree Stanley at the door. And Desiree is the glue that keeps us all together and manages the two of them and me, and I don't know which one is the most challenging, probably Brigitte and Melanie. We stole her from the University of Montana, and we're very glad to have her. We heard a lot about today is we must make our own opportunities. And for us, at the Missoula Economic Partnership, it's always about making the business case. Why does it make sense here? I'm just going to do a couple highlights of some things that I think we should look for in the coming year. Our primary focus always is what are we doing to help existing businesses grow and expand? And we are seeing companies growing every day by ones and twos and dozens and even hundreds that we're going to see over the coming year. One of the companies I think we're going to see a lot of growth in the next year is Blackfoot Telecommunications. Blackfoot is rapidly expanding their footprint around the West. They're increasing and adding jobs into this headquarters. It's very important for our economy that we have headquarter companies here and that they're growing and expanding, and that's when I think we're going to see great things in the coming year. I think another company to look at for existing businesses growing and expanding is ATG, Advanced Technology Group. We learned last week at the President's Roundtable, or 2 weeks ago, they've hired 28 alumni in the last year, and they're rapidly growing. And again, this is a company that's headquartered here. All of their work is largely outside of this area, so it's great primary jobs that they're investing and bringing money into our economy. I think Nutritional Labs, which you'll see on your brochure, there's a good summary of some of our activity, and they're highlighted in there, and we're going to see some good job growth out of Nutritional Labs. Roseburg Wood Products has just publicly announced they're going to put a multi-million-dollar investment in their facility. That's a commitment to this community, and it's the ability for them to grow and expand and put on new people in the coming year. And as we're slowly coming out of recession, seeing a wood products company put investment in our community is something that we're very proud of, and we're proud to have Roseburg here. So there's many other companies that talk about. Those are just some highlights. You know, we also do a lot of entrepreneurship. So our first focus is business retention expansion. How do we help existing businesses grow and expand? But we do entrepreneurship. I think a company that we're going to see good things coming out this next year is QuantPost. QuantPost is a company started by Dr. Lester Dye. He's a Montana Tech graduate, Stanford PhD, and he has developed a real-time analysis for options trading that is going to give people who are doing options trading the ability to do real analysis and at different levels of comfort on risk to make decisions. And this is a company in Montana that's going to have a worldwide impact. I think they already have 4 employees. Fuel Montana Media. If you've stopped at a gas station and seen those gas pump video boards, that's Fuel Montana Media. It started by David Bell from Alps. I don't know if David's here. In the back, in the cheap seats. Fuel Montana started in Missoula. It's already being deployed across the state. By the end of the year, it'll be all the way through Sydney. It's the only statewide media distribution center or company in the state of Montana. And so our ability to, again, have a headquarter company here that's doing content across the state is very important, and a good company for us to watch out for. Acuity. So this is always the danger to me. These are engineers with an MBA. That's the scary group. But they're designing and manufacturing 3D printers. They're in a office, the 4 of them about the size of this stage downtown, developing and designing and building 3D printers. In fact, they're doing a Kickstarter campaign right now. And if you haven't looked at Kickstarter, I recommend you do that. That's a way that companies are now trying to get the equity financing to build a product. And we have a number of Missoula-based companies that are using Kickstarter. But it's a really interesting financing mechanism, and that's another interesting company for us. Rescripts. This is a company that came out of the business plan competition that we're actually very proud to be the lead sponsor now for the John Raffato business plan competition. This was a pharmacy graduate student that said, I think there's got to be a different way how prescription drugs are managed in pharmacies, and I think I have a business idea. And he entered into the business plan competition, but he didn't really have any business background or expertise. But he's taken that from a business plan and now to a business that he's starting. I think he's going to be located in Montauk. But that really moves along to the next thing that the University of Montana is doing, as well as Montana State, and that's the Blackstone Launchpad. That's a funding that the 2 universities received from the Blackstone Group out of New York City to help businesses like this or students like this to say, I have a business idea, but I have no idea what to do. When they're going to have a Launchpad office, I think it's going to be in this facility, in this building. A director will be hired, I think, by the first of the year, that it's going to be open to students and alumni of the university to say, I have a business idea, how do I get there? So for us, that is a great feeder. We start with the business plan. We go to the Launchpad. Then we move to Montech, which you heard earlier today, has the highest level of technology infrastructure of any incubator in the state of Montana. And eventually we graduate them into business. And those are that's a great stream there. So that's kind of what we're doing in a sample of the entrepreneurship world. And then, of course, we do recruitment. We recruit to the core areas that are our strengths. The companies that are already successful here and doing business, those are the companies we try to recruit here. So for us, it's life sciences. It's Rocky Mountain Biological type companies. I saw Suresh over there, which is a great company that's growing rapidly here. Information technology. We learned a lot about that, as President Engstrom said at the roundtable. We learned that the highest paying non-engineering profession in the United States is computer science. And we learned that today we can't meet the demand of Montana for computer science students, let alone add to it. Every computer science student that graduates could have a job. And I think we're graduating 20, 25. And so it's really going to take an effort by the private sector to say, is this important to us, and how do we put the resources to partner with the university and move this forward and meet the needs. I can't think of his name, Gianforte, what's his first name? He announced at the Butte Economic Summit his program for, in the high schools, 400 students going into computer science. Today, they would have to leave Montana. We don't have the seats available in the universities to meet these students. And so it's really thinking, kind of what the governor said, systemically about the education system and moving us forward. So information technology is important to us. Manufacturing is always important. Manufacturing is the history of this community. It's going to be the future of our community as well. We need to have diversified manufacturing. And Brad Reed always likes me to mention diversified plastics. So that's a great company, a great example of a manufacturing company. We're seeing increased pressure of manufacturing companies. We were hoping to have one we were going to talk about today, but as usual, it'll be a week or two after the annual meeting, we'll have an announcement. Back office and creative services is another area that we target for growth. And then, of course, there's forest products and renewables. There was some mention today about we use site selectors as our primary recruitment method, other than answering the phone when people call. And that is to bring site selectors to our community to understand what we have to offer. And remember, site selection is really the wrong term. It's site elimination. The quicker they can get Missoula or Montana off the list, the better it is for them, where we're trying desperately to stay on the island as long as we can. And the first way we do it is we got to bring them here so they understand what we have to offer in Montana and in Missoula. It normally is, I think, is what the governor said. You don't have the workforce for our needs. And we would say, au contraire, we actually do, but we need to come demonstrate that. And that's why it's really important for us to work with site selectors. We think one of the best opportunities for business growth in Missoula is partnering with Bill at the Alumni Association. We have thousands of graduates that would love the opportunity to come back to Montana, whether it to come as an employee or to bring a business. And we'll see increased activity with us in the Alumni Association that we're partnering to convey that message. We went to Senator Baucus's Economic Summit in Butte, which for those that were there, you understand that was a phenomenal event to have in Montana. I can't imagine any other state doing that. I mean, 4,000 people from every single county coming and converging and talking about the economic future of our state. But we went there with a specific agenda. We identified companies we wanted to talk to before we got there. And that's one of the things Senator Baucus does is he facilitates that meeting. So we had a conversation. We got to meet the CEO of Delta. And we talked about air service. Though wherever Alex is, we're going to filter your questions from now on. We went and met with ConocoPhillips. But we didn't go talk to ConocoPhillips about what are you doing in the oil fields. We went and talked to them about what are you doing for your data analysis? What do you have? We think there's a huge growth opportunity in big data analytics. And we think we're positioned as the community that can help them understand those needs. We met with Boeing. And again, not saying how do we find manufacturing facilities for Missoula. Our agenda with Boeing was talk about cybersecurity. What are they doing in cyber? This is one of the few growth opportunities for Western Montana, white-collar jobs, that our geographic isolation actually is a benefit to us. And so I think we did a good job thinking strategically about who we wanted to see and why we wanted to see them. And I think some of you were in the room with the Boeing official. I think it took him 20 minutes to figure out what we were asking for. And we were asking for a partnership between Boeing and the University of Montana to develop a cyber lab and move and get an educated workforce to meet their needs. So we're out there pitching, and we always know we're not always going to be successful every company we pitch. But that doesn't mean we keep trying. And we don't know which one is going to be the success, and we don't know which one is not. So we treat them all the same. So I guess on my closing comments, I was going to talk a little bit about our Air Service Task Force. If you recall, this has 3 primary missions. In-state air service is one of the tasks that the Air Service Task Force looks at. We have a local company that is putting in a application through the Big Sky Trust Fund for a feasibility assessment to have in-state service from Missoula to Billings. So that continues to move forward, and I think that's a good thing. The second effort that we've always had is what other markets make sense for Missoula to help us capitalize business opportunities. Chris and Brian from the airport, Brigitte and I had a conversation earlier this week with officials from Delta. Delta last summer had seasonal service to Atlanta, direct flights. It was so successful next year, they've already announced there's going to be twice-a-week flights. Now, that might not seem much at the start, but it all takes increments to get us there. Over the holiday season, they're offering daily service nonstop to Los Angeles from Missoula. 10 days, I think we're already at over 50% booking. They're all very, very pleased by those early reservations, and so we're already now thinking and talking to them, how do we start that service daily or weekly service nonstop to Los Angeles beginning in the spring, and I think we'll see that. Delta's very optimistic what we're going to have there. Last one, of course, is we always talk about a low-cost carrier. Part of the argument why is it expensive in Missoula is because the plane is full. That's why. That's part of it. We've worked very hard last year or 18 months with a low-cost carrier, Frontier Airlines, to look into coming into this market. We have officially heard from them that they're not considering Missoula in their 2014 market. In fact, we're going to see a reduction of service by Frontier into Montana as a whole. But that doesn't mean we don't continue looking for other opportunities or other low-cost carriers or other efforts, because we know it's a real business decision to locate here is the cost of doing business, and transportation cost is part of it. So I think we could talk about lots of other things, lots of other partnerships we have with the University of Montana. But I think we see really good things in the future. I think I've identified some companies that we really should watch for in the coming year. And remember, we couldn't do any of this without all of you here. So thank you. And with that, I guess I'll turn it back to Jeff.
Thanks, James. We're going to wind up here real quick. I know we're a little past time, so I'll be brief. First, I'd like to thank again the governor and Dr. Barkey for being our speakers today, and thanks for coming over. And as James said, we can't do this without you, so our ask of all of you in this room today is to stay informed, to stay engaged. Read the partnership emails, read our letters, join us on Facebook and LinkedIn. Keep an eye on our monthly in-business columns and partnership and action stories on the web. As a reminder, we meet as an investor community 3 times a year, so we hope to see you back here next year in February, June, and next October. And please stay in contact with our staff. Share with them your ideas. More importantly, share with them leads. It's amazing how something which may seem insignificant can turn into something really big. So keep your ear to the ground. Certainly watch out, stay informed, stay engaged, and thanks for coming.